On August 30th, 1905, an 18-year-old kid from rural Georgia stepped to the plate against Jack Chesbro, the pitcher who had won 41 games the year before. First pitch, double into the outfield. That was Ty Cobb's introduction to the major leagues. And for the next 24 years, he would terrorize baseball like no one before or since. 90 records, 12 batting titles, a career average of .366, 3 consecutive pennants, the first player to 4,000 hits, 54 stolen homes, still the record, 23 straight seasons hitting over 300. When the Hall of Fame held its first vote in 1936, Cobb got more votes than Babe Ruth, more than Honus Wagner, more than anyone. But here's what makes Cobb's story unforgettable. 3 weeks before that debut, his mother had shot and killed his father with a pistol. The 18-year-old was playing through a nightmare, haunted by the last words his father ever spoke to him. "Don't come home a failure." Those 5 words fueled everything. The rage, the brilliance, the records that seemed unbreakable. They drove Cobb to greatness and cursed him with demons he could never outrun. This is the story of Tyrus Raymond Cobb, the Georgia Peach, the fiercest competitor baseball has ever seen. Ty Cobb was born on December 18, 1886, in Narrows, Georgia, a tiny rural community in the northeastern part of the state. He was the first of 3 children born to William Herschel Cobb and Amanda Chitwood. His father was one of the most prominent men in the region. William Cobb was an educator who rose to become Franklin County's school commissioner. He served as a state senator. He owned and edited the local newspaper. He was mentioned as a potential candidate for governor. William Cobb was a demanding man who expected excellence from his children in everything they did. He was also a progressive voice in the post-Civil War South, a region still wrestling with the legacy of slavery and the bitterness of defeat. The Cobb family had a long history of opposing slavery that set them apart from many of their neighbors. Ty's great-grandfather was a minister who preached against the practice and was run out of town for it. His grandfather refused to fight for the Confederacy because of the slavery issue. William Cobb himself spoke up for his black constituents as a state senator and was known to have once broken up a lynch mob. Young Ty grew up on a farm outside Royston, learning the value of hard work in the Georgia clay. He worked alongside his father in the fields, developing the strength and determination that would serve him throughout his life. But his true passion was baseball. By the age of 14, he was playing alongside adults on the local team in Royston. He was good. Everyone could see it, but his father disapproved. William Cobb wanted his son to pursue a respectable profession: law, medicine, the military. Baseball seemed like a path to becoming a ruffian, a waste of the intellect and potential his son clearly possessed. But Ty was relentless. The more his father pushed him toward conventional success, the more the boy gravitated toward the diamond. In 1904, at the age of 17, he tried out for the Augusta Tourists of the South Atlantic League. He made the team, but struggled badly, hitting just .237 in limited action. The team released him before the season ended. A lesser player might have given up. Cobb did not. He joined a semi-professional team in Anniston, Alabama, the Anniston Steelers of the Tennessee-Alabama League. He played for $50 a month and a chance to prove himself. His father, finally relenting, gave him his blessing with a stern warning: "Don't come home a failure." Here in Anniston, Cobb showed the cunning and self-promotion that would define his career as much as his batting stroke. He began sending postcards to Grantland Rice, the influential sports editor of the Atlanta Journal, praising a talented young outfielder named Ty Cobb. He wrote these letters himself, using different handwriting styles and different aliases. Eventually, Rice took notice and wrote a small item in his column: "A young fellow named Cobb seems to be showing an unusual lot of talent." The Augusta Tourists saw Rice's column and brought Cobb back for another chance. This time, under manager George Leidy, he began to flourish. Leidy saw something special in the intense young Georgian. He taught Cobb the arts of pinpoint bunting and aggressive base running. He emphasized using speed and intelligence to manufacture runs in an era when home runs were rare. Cobb absorbed every lesson like a man possessed. By the summer of 1905, Cobb had attracted attention from Major League scouts. The Detroit Tigers purchased his contract for $750, roughly $27,000 in today's money. It was one of the greatest bargains in baseball history. Cobb was on his way to the major leagues. His father had finally come to accept his son's chosen path. William Cobb even expressed pride in what Ty had accomplished. And then tragedy struck. A tragedy so devastating that it would shape everything Cobb became. On the night of August 8, 1905, William Herschel Cobb told his wife Amanda that he was leaving for the family farm and would not return that night. But William Cobb was suspicious. Rumors had circulated throughout Royston that his young wife, nearly 20 years his junior, was having an affair. Some townspeople had whispered about it for months. William intended to catch her in the act. Late that night, William Cobb returned to his home in Royston. He left his horse and buggy at a distance and approached on foot. He climbed onto the porch roof and crept toward the bedroom window, pistol in hand. What happened next remains unclear to this day. Amanda Cobb said she heard someone at the window. Believing it was an intruder, she grabbed the pistol her husband had given her for protection. She fired 2 shots. William Cobb died from his wounds. The story spread through Royston like wildfire. Professor Cobb, the state senator, the school commissioner, the most prominent man in the county, was shot dead by his own wife. Amanda said she had mistaken her husband for a burglar, but many in town did not believe her. Why was William carrying a pistol himself? Why had he told her he would be away? What was he trying to catch her doing? A coroner's inquest ordered Amanda's arrest on charges of voluntary manslaughter. She was released on a $7,000 bond and awaited trial. Ty Cobb was in Augusta playing baseball when he received the telegram from a family friend. The message was stark. "Come at once. Very sorry. Your father dead in shooting accident. Hurry." Cobb rushed home to find chaos. Sheriffs, doctors, reporters, and stunned townspeople overran the family home. His mother was hysterical. His younger brother and sister were devastated. The father Cobb idolized, the man whose approval he had sought his entire life, was gone. Cobb later called it the blackest of days. He rarely spoke of the incident publicly for the rest of his life. When he did mention it in his autobiography decades later, he referred to it only as a shooting accident and offered few details. But those who knew him well said he never recovered from the trauma. The drive that had always burned inside him now became something fiercer, something almost desperate. Amanda Cobb stood trial in March of 1906. Prosecutors questioned her about discrepancies in her story, about the time between the 2 shots, about why she had fired twice. But no lover was produced, no evidence of infidelity was presented. The all-male jury acquitted her. Ty Cobb attended the trial. He left the courthouse in silence. The gossip in Royston continued. It was one reason Cobb rarely returned to his hometown in the years that followed. Cobb later said of his baseball career, "I did it for my father. He never got to see me play. Not one game, not an inning. But I knew he was watching me, and I never let him down. Never." 3 weeks after his father's death, Cobb reported to the Detroit Tigers. Cobb's rookie season was difficult in ways that went beyond his private grief. The veteran Tigers players subjected him to brutal hazing, far worse than what most rookies endured. They smashed his homemade bats, the ones he had crafted himself back in Georgia. They nailed his cleats to the clubhouse floor. They doused his clothes with water and tied them in knots. They locked him out of the bathroom. They verbally abused him constantly, mocking his southern accent and his youth. In that era, rookie hazing was common throughout baseball. Veterans tested newcomers, established the pecking order, and made the youngsters prove they belonged. But the treatment Cobb received was exceptionally harsh. Some of the veteran Tigers were jealous of the highly touted young prospect. Others resented his intensity, his refusal to know his place. A few simply wanted to drive him off the team and end the competition for playing time. Tigers manager Hughie Jennings later acknowledged what happened. He said he let this go for a while because he wanted to satisfy himself that Cobb has as much guts as he thought in the very beginning. Well, he proved it to me, and I told the other players to let him alone. He is going to be a great baseball player, and I won't allow him to be driven off this club. Cobb later attributed his hostile temperament directly to this experience. He said that these old-timers turned him into a snarling wildcat. The hazing, coming on top of his father's violent death, hardened him. He would never forget how he had been treated. He would never trust teammates fully again. He hit just .240 in the 41 games that first season. He was the youngest player in the American League by almost a year, still mourning his father, still processing the trauma and scandal back home. But he showed enough promise that the Tigers signed him to a $1,500 contract for 1906. The following year, everything changed. Under Jennings's protection, Cobb emerged as one of the best players in baseball. He hit .316 in 98 games, setting a record for the highest batting average by a 19-year-old. He played with a ferocity that startled opponents and teammates alike. He ran the bases like a man possessed. He would never hit below .316 again for the rest of his career. In 1907, at the age of 20, Cobb won his first batting title with a .350 average. The Tigers won the American League pennant and faced the Chicago Cubs in the World Series. Though the Tigers lost, Cobb had arrived on the national stage. What followed was the most dominant stretch of hitting in baseball history. From 1907 through 1915, Cobb won 9 consecutive batting titles. No player has ever matched that feat. His averages during that stretch were staggering: .350, .324, .377, .383, .420, .409, .390, .368, and .369. He hit over .400 3 times in his career. In 1911, 1912, and 1922. His .420 mark in 1911 remains one of the highest single-season averages in modern baseball history. But Cobb was far more than a hitter. He was the most complete offensive player of his era, a man who could beat you in a dozen different ways. In 1909, he won the Triple Crown, leading the American League in batting average with .377, home runs with 9, and runs batted in with 107. He was the first player in league history to accomplish the feat. In 1911, he had what many consider the greatest offensive season ever played. He led the American League in batting average at .420, hits with 248, runs scored with 147, runs batted in with 127, stolen bases with 83, doubles with 47, triples with 24, and slugging percentage at .621. He compiled a 40-game hitting streak during the season. The only major offensive category he did not win was home runs, where he finished second with 8 to Frank Baker's 11. The Baseball Writers Association named him the American League's most valuable player. His teammate Sam Crawford said simply, "He didn't out-hit and he didn't outrun them. He outthought them." Cobb's dominance extended to the base paths, where he was perhaps even more dangerous than at the plate. He was not the fastest runner in baseball. Several players could beat him in a straight foot race. But he was the smartest and most aggressive base runner the game had ever seen. He invented the fall-away slide, which fooled basemen and allowed him to evade tags. He studied every pitcher's delivery obsessively, memorizing their timing, their tells, their habits. He developed 9 different sliding techniques, using whichever one the situation demanded. He learned to read catchers and infielders, to anticipate where they would throw and when. In 1915, he set the single-season stolen base record with 96, a mark that stood for 47 years until Maury Wills broke it in 1962. But Cobb's signature play was stealing home. He did it 54 times in his career, a record that still stands today and may never be broken. In 1912 alone, he stole home 8 times. Another record, he once stole second, third, and home on 3 consecutive pitches against the Philadelphia Athletics, leaving the pitcher so unnerved that he threw a perfect pitch for Sam Crawford to drive into the outfield. He led the American League in stolen bases 6 times and retired with 897 career steals. That record stood until Lou Brock broke it in 1977. Rickey Henderson would eventually push the record past 1,400. Cobb played with an intensity that terrified opponents. He once said that baseball was a struggle for supremacy, a survival of the fittest. He meant it literally. Every game was war. Every at-bat was combat. Every stolen base was a battle he intended to win. His reputation for violence grew throughout his career. He was known for sliding into bases with his spikes high, daring infielders to get in his way. Stories spread that he sharpened his spikes before games with a file, honing them into weapons. Whether those stories were true or exaggerated, opposing players feared him. They gave him room on the base paths. They thought twice before blocking the plate. Cobb got into countless fights on the field. He brawled with opponents. He brawled with teammates. He fought with umpires. He had no friends on opposing teams, except perhaps Joe Jackson, a fellow Southerner he both liked and ruthlessly manipulated. During a tight batting race in 1911, Cobb used psychological warfare on Jackson, ignoring him and snapping at him to throw him off his game. It worked. Jackson slumped while Cobb surged to the batting title. In May of 1912, Cobb crossed a line that would follow him forever. During a game at Hilltop Park in New York, a heckler named Claude Luca had been taunting him viciously for innings. Luca allegedly made crude remarks about Cobb's mother and used racial slurs, reportedly insulting Cobb's ancestry in a way that enraged him beyond reason. Cobb snapped. He vaulted over the railing, climbed 12 rows into the stands, and beat Luca savagely in front of thousands of spectators. When someone shouted that Luca had no hands, having lost his fingers in a printing press accident, Cobb yelled back that he did not care if the man had no feet. He continued the assault until park police pulled him away. American League President Ban Johnson, who was at the game, suspended Cobb for 10 days. His teammates, whatever they thought of Cobb personally, refused to play without him. They went on strike for 1 game, and the Tigers were forced to field a team of amateur replacement players recruited from the stands and local colleges. Detroit lost that game 17-0 to the Philadelphia Athletics. The incident crystallized Cobb's reputation as a dangerous man willing to cross any line. But it also revealed something else. Despite everything, his teammates respected him. They stood by him when it mattered. Cobb led the Tigers to 3 consecutive American League pennants from 1907 through 1909. But all 3 World Series ended in defeat. The Tigers lost to the Chicago Cubs in 1907, 4-0 with 1 tie. They lost to the Cubs again in 1908, 4-1. And they lost to the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1909, 4-3. Cobb batted just .262 across those 3 series, a disappointment for a player who hit .367 during the regular seasons of those same years. He stole home in Game 2 of the 1909 series and drove in 5 runs, but it was not enough. The Pirates had Honus Wagner, the greatest player in the National League, and they prevailed. Cobb would never return to the World Series as a player. It remains the greatest gap in his legacy, the one thing his ferocious will could not achieve. In 1921, Cobb became the player-manager of the Tigers. He was 34 years old and still one of the best hitters in baseball. He hit .401 that year, .378 the next, and .340 after that. The man simply refused to age. As a manager, Cobb was demanding and difficult. He expected his players to play with the same intensity he did. Few could. He pushed them hard, criticized them openly, and drove some of them to distraction. The Tigers finished with a record of 479 wins and 444 losses over his 6 seasons as manager. They finished second twice, but never won the pennant. Cobb continued to produce extraordinary numbers at the plate well into his 30s. In 1922, at age 35, he hit .401 again, though he lost the batting title to George Sisler's .420. In 1925, at age 38, Cobb had one of the most remarkable performances of his career. Stung by criticism that he was a relic of the dead ball era who could not hit for power in the modern game, Cobb reportedly told reporters before a May game against the St. Louis Browns that he would show them something new. He then hit 3 home runs in that game and 2 more the following day, driving in 11 runs over the 2-game stretch. He later admitted the outburst was partly to prove that he could have hit home runs all along if he had wanted to. He simply believed that his style of baseball, the scientific game of bunts and steals and manufacturing runs, was superior to the power game that Babe Ruth had popularized. By 1926, Cobb's time in Detroit was ending. A gambling scandal emerged, with accusations that Cobb and Tris Speaker had conspired to fix a game back in 1919. The accusations were later proven baseless, and both men were cleared. But the damage was done. Cobb resigned as manager and left the Tigers after 22 seasons. He joined Connie Mack's Philadelphia Athletics for his final 2 seasons, determined to prove he still belonged. Playing alongside young stars like Jimmy Fox and Al Simmons, the 40-year-old Cobb hit .357 in 1927 and .323 in 1928. On July 18, 1927, he doubled off former teammate Sam Gibson at Navin Field in Detroit, becoming the first player in history to reach 4,000 career hits. On September 11, 1928, Cobb announced his retirement. His final at-bat came against the New York Yankees. He popped out to shortstop Mark Koenig, then walked off the field for the last time as a player. The numbers Cobb left behind were staggering: 4,189 hits, 2,245 runs scored, 897 stolen bases, 12 batting titles, a career batting average of .366. He had batted over 300 in 23 consecutive seasons, every year of his career except his rookie season. He had hit over 400 3 times. He had won 9 consecutive batting titles from 1907 through 1915. He held 90 major league records when he retired. Many seemed unbreakable. In 1936, when the Baseball Writers Association held the first election for the National Baseball Hall of Fame, Cobb received the most votes of any player. He appeared on 222 of 226 ballots, a percentage of 98.2%. He outpolled Babe Ruth. He outpolled Honus Wagner. He outpolled Christy Mathewson and Walter Johnson, the only other players elected that first year. No player would receive a higher percentage of votes until Tom Seaver in 1992. Cobb retired a wealthy man. Unlike most players of his era who squandered their earnings or invested poorly, Cobb had been shrewdly building wealth since his early playing days. He bought stock in Coca-Cola when the company was still regional, believing in the product after tasting it in his native Georgia. He invested in General Motors when automobiles were still a novelty. He speculated in cotton futures. He endorsed products for substantial fees. By the time of his death, his estate was worth nearly $12 million, the equivalent of more than $125 million today. $10 million of that was in General Motors stock alone. But Cobb did not simply hoard his fortune. He used his wealth philanthropically, giving back to the Georgia communities that had raised him. He established the Ty Cobb healthcare system, building a hospital in his hometown of Royston. The hospital still operates today. He created the Cobb Educational Fund to provide scholarships for Georgia students who could not otherwise afford college. The foundation has distributed more than $11 million in scholarships over the decades since his death, sending thousands of young Georgians to universities they otherwise could not have attended. Yet Cobb's later years were marked by loneliness and declining health. He married Charlotte Lombard in 1908, and they had 5 children together, 3 sons and 2 daughters. But the marriage deteriorated over the decades. Cobb was demanding and difficult at home, just as he had been on the field. Charlotte filed for divorce multiple times before finally following through in 1947, ending 39 years of marriage. Complicated relationships with his children defined his family life. He expected them to excel as he had, particularly his sons. When his eldest son, Tyrus Jr., flunked out of Princeton, Cobb was furious. The relationship never fully recovered, even after his son reformed, earned a medical degree, and became a doctor. Tyrus Jr. died of a brain tumor in 1952 at age 42, outliving his father by only 9 years. Cobb's health declined steadily through the 1950s. He suffered from diabetes, high blood pressure, and Bright's disease, a kidney ailment. He spent much of his time at Lake Tahoe, Nevada, and in Georgia, drinking heavily and dwelling on the past. In December of 1959, he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He had perhaps 2 years to live. Cobb spent his final months working on his autobiography with a sports writer named Al Stump. The book, My Life in Baseball: The True Record, was published in 1961, shortly after Cobb's death. It presented Cobb in a positive light and focused largely on his theories about how the game should be played. But Stump had other plans. After Cobb died, Stump published articles and eventually another book portraying Cobb as a violent, racist monster. He claimed that Cobb waved guns at people, abused hospital staff, and died so despised that only 3 people from baseball attended his funeral. These stories shaped Cobb's reputation for decades. They were repeated in books, articles, and the 1994 film, Cobb, which starred Tommy Lee Jones. But much of what Stump wrote has since been discredited. Researchers have found that Stump fabricated stories, invented quotes from unnamed sources, and stole memorabilia from Cobb's estate. The claim that only 3 people from baseball attended his funeral was false. Cobb's family had requested a private service and asked friends and baseball officials not to attend. Approximately 150 people attended the funeral in Cornelia, Georgia, and around 400 gathered at the cemetery in Royston. Little League players in uniform lined the road. The baseball representatives who did attend included Ray Schalk, Mickey Cochran, Knapp Rucker, and Hall of Fame director Sid Keener. Messages of condolence came from Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, and hundreds of others. The truth about Cobb's racial views was also more complicated than Stump portrayed. In 1952, when the Texas League was integrating, Sporting News asked Cobb for his opinion. He said that the Negro should be accepted wholeheartedly and not grudgingly. He had attended Negro League games, thrown out ceremonial first pitches, and sat in the dugout with players. His family had a history of opposing slavery. His father had once broken up a lynch mob. This is not to say Cobb was a saint. He had a violent temper. He got into fights on and off the field. He was demanding and difficult with his family. He was a product of his time and place, with all the limitations that implies. But the monster portrayed by Stump was largely a fiction, created by a writer looking to sell magazines. Charles Learson's 2015 biography, Ty Cobb, A Terrible Beauty, did much to restore a more balanced view of the man. Other historians have followed, examining the primary sources rather than repeating Stump's claims. What emerges is a picture of a complicated man, a fierce competitor who played the game harder than anyone before or since. A grieving son who never recovered from his father's violent death. A shrewd businessman who became one of baseball's first millionaires. A philanthropist who built hospitals and funded scholarships for thousands of students. A difficult husband and father who struggled with intimacy and drove away those closest to him. A proud Southerner whose views on race, shaped by his family's abolitionist history, were more nuanced than the caricature that emerged after his death. Ty Cobb died on July 17, 1961, at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta. He was 74 years old. His first wife, Charlie, his son, Jimmy, his daughters, and other family members were at his bedside in his final days. He had checked himself into Emory after falling into a diabetic coma. Approximately 150 people attended a brief funeral service in Cornelia, Georgia. then drove to the Cobb family mausoleum in Royston for the burial. Little League players in uniform lined the road in the cemetery. Around 400 people gathered to watch the casket carried into the mausoleum. He rests there alongside his father, the man whose violent death had shaped his entire life. The father who never saw him play a single inning of professional baseball. The father whose final words had echoed through 24 seasons and 4,189 hits. In 1999, the Sporting News ranked Cobb third on its list of baseball's 100 greatest players, behind only Babe Ruth and Willie Mays. He remains one of the most discussed and debated figures in the history of American sports. His records have mostly fallen now. Pete Rose broke his hits record in 1985, grinding out singles over 24 seasons to reach 4,256. Rickey Henderson passed his runs scored total in 2001 and eventually stole more than 1,400 bases. In 2024, when Major League Baseball incorporated Negro League statistics into the official record books, Josh Gibson's .372 career average moved ahead of Cobb's .366. But some records remain untouched. No one has won more batting titles than Cobb's 12. No one has stolen home more than his 54 times. No one has hit 300 in more consecutive seasons than his 23. No one has hit 403 times except Cobb. His 9 consecutive batting titles from 1907 through 1915 remain unmatched. And perhaps no one ever played the game with such ferocious, unrelenting, almost terrifying intensity. Casey Stengel, who faced Cobb as a player and managed against his legacy, put it simply after Cobb's death. "I never saw anyone like Ty Cobb," Stengel said. "No one even close to him. He was the greatest all-time ball player. That guy was superhuman, amazing." George Sisler, a Hall of Famer himself, offered another perspective. The greatness of Ty Cobb was something that had to be seen, and to see him was to remember him forever. And Branch Rickey, the executive who would later integrate baseball by signing Jackie Robinson, perhaps captured Cobb best of all. "Cobb lived off the field as though he wished to live forever," Rickey said. "He lived on the field as though it was his last day." Ty Cobb played every game as though his father were watching, and in a sense, he was. The demanding man who had told his son not to come home a failure never saw him play a single inning of professional baseball. But his words echoed through every at-bat, every stolen base, every batting title. "Don't come home a failure." Tyrus Raymond Cobb never did. Like and subscribe for more baseball documentaries. Until next time.